And then I should say we've learned a lot more about how criminally negligent American traffic engineering is as a profession. And that's the war horse that I've hopped on more recently. In the first version of Walkable City, I quote Chuck Marone, who wrote an essay called Confessions of a Recovering Engineer that I featured in the book, about how he, in his business, would regularly tell neighbors and communities that he was working that he was making their street safer by widening it, and putting in a clear zone where people used to have their front yards, and then charging them higher taxes to pay for the road, which was basically just speeding people through their neighborhood. He's since turned that essay into a full book, and I've learned a lot from him and from my own practice about how absolutely backwards traffic engineering is in the US. And I'll give you the very short version. We can elaborate on it later.
Yeah.
Which is that the basic philosophy of American traffic engineering or street design, which is the opposite of what they do in Europe, is to build forgiveness into the system, to put in a lot of elbow room, to make lanes extra wide, to have clear zones, to limit the number of intersections. You actually have to design a street for a speed 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit that you then post on it. So I was building a street in Alabama, and the Shelby County traffic engineer made me loosen the swoops and change the vertical displacement as well to make the speed faster, because they insisted that it have a 25 mile an hour posted speed limit, which means we need to design it for 35 miles per hour. Now, what they understand in Europe is that elbow room only causes speeding. And the principal contributor to death and destruction in traffic crashes is speed. It's a logarithmic relationship, right? If you double the speed of a vehicle, you quadruple. I think it's worse than that. I mean, a car going 35 miles an hour is 7 times as likely to kill you as a car going 25 miles an hour. And plus there's braking distance and cone of vision and all those other things that come into play when the drivers are going faster. So the proper strategy to make neighborhoods safe, both downtowns and residential neighborhoods, is to make it hard to drive fast. And that's the opposite of what's been applied in the US. So not only have crash rates, been holding steady despite all the incredible safety equipment we keep adding to our vehicles, but the number of pedestrian deaths and cyclist deaths has skyrocketed. Compared to 14 years ago, there are 82% more pedestrians dying in traffic in the US. That's incredible, right? And that was 2 years ago. I believe now with the 2022 data, it's 100% or like 105% worse than it was 14 years ago, which was the low point.
How are we going to make an adjustment for that?
Well, I do
How
it.
Are we going to be able to go back?
I do it in every project I work on. The problem is that the standards are still bad. So as new streets are built, many of them are still being built to the wrong standard. But the main activity that I do professionally, and it's the easiest to do when a community embraces it, is to redesign streets to welcome the posted speed limit as opposed to welcoming higher speeds. So what do you look at when you look at a street? How wide are the lanes? Now, I'm talking about commercial streets or busy, dense areas. When you're in a single family neighborhood, you can have skinny streets, narrow ways. You can have a 12-foot street with parking that handles travel in 2 directions. Most of our older cities have these older neighborhoods of very delicate ribbon-like streets, single family homes that historically have been 20 to 24 feet wide and have held two-way traffic plus parking. If you're in Albuquerque and you want to have a street with two-way traffic and parking, it's got to be 40 feet wide. 40 feet, wow. 2 12-foot lanes and 2 way, in a single family residential neighborhood. So that's insane. But when you're talking about commercial places, we used to have 10-foot lanes. That's a 35 mile an hour lane. A lot of cities now have a 12-foot lane. Omaha has a 12-foot lane. Well, that's a 70 mile an hour lane. Of course, people are going to speed when they have that much tarmac in front of them. You look at one-way versus two-way travel. I'm speaking in Lexington, Kentucky on Monday. So I just went into the Google. I do what I always do before I speak. I went into the Google and I looked at their streets. They have one-way pairs in their downtown. They have streets of travel in one direction, multi-lane. They used to be two-way streets. Now they're one-way streets. More than 100 American cities, including an over the Rhine in Cincinnati, have reverted their one-way pairs back to two-way travel. And all it's ever done is calm traffic, bring business, and save lives. These one-way pairs in which there's more than one lane going in one direction, where there didn't used to be, gives you the opportunity to jockey and generally invites speeds much faster than you'd find on a two-way street. And typically and most old timers you talk to in cities remember this. They remember the day the one-ways came in and all the businesses died. Because it's also really bad for shopping to have people driving this fast and also driving in the mindset of someone who knows there's an extra lane. Because if you're like me, you know there's an extra lane, you know that you're in the wrong lane and you're not paying attention to anything except how you can be in the fastest lane, and you're no longer a shopper, you know, you're a racer. So, and then the data show clearly when you convert a two-lane one-way or a three-lane one-way back to two-way travel, not only do the businesses thrive, but the number of injury crashes goes down by about half. So that's something we bring to cities. We replace signals with stop signs. If you have an intersection that has a signal in it and you replace that signal with an all-way stop sign, severe pedestrian injury crashes drop by 67%. And we know that from 400 of these intersections being changed in Philadelphia back in the last century. But if you think about how you drive through a light where yellow means speed up versus how you drive through a stop sign, you understand why this is the case. The surprising part, the counterintuitive part, is you can actually get through a city with stop signs faster than a city with signals because you're never sitting there waiting for the light to change. When you remove the center line from a street, that double yellow stripe, people drive 7 miles an hour slower. And that's a perfect example of what we call risk homeostasis or risk compensation, that people drive the speed. People generally behave in a way in which they enjoy the amount of risk that they're used, people generally drive the way that allows them to experience the exact amount of risk that they enjoy. And that's a technical term, enjoyment in that case. But some people, it's a pleasure as well, particularly young boys, young men. But the double yellow line tells you that you're not going to hit the person coming at you.
But we still do at times, so that's why
Yeah. So we still do at times, but what that yellow line does is it gives you comfort and removes the caution that you show when there's no line in the street. So we're always looking for little tricks like that. And, I learned about the double yellow line maybe 4 years ago. I learned about the stop signs maybe 8 years ago. Every year I learn something new. And it's remarkable how much more we have to learn. And we're not learning it from the leadership in the traffic engineering profession in the US, that's for sure.